Hey friends, Rob here. Today I want to talk to you about real estate photography. I want to share with you my process, the strategy, how I go about it, pricing, and the equipment that I use. Those four things are what we're going to talk about today, and I'm not going to waste any of your time, so we're going to jump straight into it. I want to say up front, if you have questions and you're not subscribed, I won't answer them. It may take me a time to get to subscribers' questions, but I answer all subscribers' questions, and the easiest way to get my attention is to send a super thanks when you ask that question. So if you want my help, let's jump into it. We're going to look at these images in just a moment. I want to share with you how we go about it. But let's first talk pricing, because if you don't know anything about pricing, then it doesn't really make any sense as to what you're going to do. So for the pricing, we're going to jump over to the video. So as we're here, real estate services, where I have everything really focuses around my Photos Plus package. The Photos Plus packages are important because it gets people in the door. Generally speaking, realtors don't really want to buy your service. In my area in Hampton Roads, they don't really want to. They have a lot of people that are in-house that are working for $10 or $12 or $15 an hour, whatever the minimum wage is, and they think they're photographers and they send them out. When they don't get the job done right, those realtors then begin looking for people like me, actual photographers, to come do it. By that time, they're used to paying somebody $10 an hour and they don't understand why and you're going to charge $250 for this package right here. So you're already fighting an uphill battle. Now, if you're a photographer and you're looking at this, you're saying, well, how long does it take to do 35 photos? $249 plus an aerial, a digital twilight conversion, a feature card, whatever that is. I'll get to it in a minute. A blue sky guarantee and a 24-hour delivery. That's pretty cheap. And the answer is you're 100% correct. This is not really worth your time. In most cases, well, that's not fair. It is worth your time because it's a real payment. It's worth your time if there's not a lot of hassle. So these prices are part of my quick and affordable pricing, right? Which is just simple. The reason is, how many phone calls should it take to get a job scheduled? How many phone calls does it take to get your lawn mowed? How many phone calls does it take to find someone that's going to work on your car? Where do you want to take it? After you have figured that out, the rest of the payment, the rest of the process is easy. So all of this is based upon the idea that we don't have to have 1,000 emails. And because of that, in my contracts, I actually have a multiple contact per contract clause. And what that says is that this pricing that is being extended is specific to less than 3 contacts. And those less than 3 contacts to complete the work are all inclusive. It's even limited to something like a total of 15 minutes of time. Because if you don't, you're going to get people that contact you 10, 15 emails plus 3 or 4 phone calls that are never satisfied. And you will set yourself up for failure because that $250 has just been wasted away in how long does it take you to answer emails? How many phone calls do you have to be on? See, there are people that are going to try to treat you like an employee of their company, and you're not. So when you realize that's happening, well, that's when the multiple contacts per contract clause comes into effect. At that point in time, it's an immediate $100, and it continues to go up from there per contact for premium planning and support that is provided by me, the professional photographer. In my contracts, all of my contracts state that I am the professional and the one that determines what a deliverable image is by setting what a deliverable image is and how those items are to be delivered. The client has no discretion in it. They can be as mad as they want. They can have their own personal truths about what they think. But at the end of the day, I'm the photographer. I'm going to take the photo I want to take. Now, and I'm going to deliver the photo that I want to deliver. So what happens is we go from a quick and easy or quick and affordable packaging from our just a couple contacts to get it done to something more expensive. That helps weed out the type of people you don't want to work with at all. So let's look at this. We've got this pricing model for me in my area in Hampton Roads, 35 photos, 1 aerial photo, 1 digital twilight conversion, 1 feature card, 1 blue sky, and a 24-hour guarantee deliver. We've got 35 photos plus 1, 2, 3 additional deliverable items. See, I don't actually charge for extra photos. I charge per deliverable item. And so that's because if you ever did go to litigation, you'd have to divide this down into the worth of what one particular thing is or another. I'm just getting rid of that up front in my contract. These are just deliverable items. Any one can be substituted for another at my discretion, not theirs. Of course, they can ask and I can approve or deny, but it's my discretion. I'm the photographer, I'm the client, or I'm the contractor doing the work for the client. I'm going to do what I want to do, which means that the aerial photo for me is the hardest to get around here. And it's hard to get because I'm in a military area where there's a lot of issue with temporary flight restrictions. And some days, even with authorizations from the FAA, I may not be able to fly because of a temporary flight restriction, or the wind may be, or the weather may not be conducive. So I need to have something that I can substitute without anyone saying anything in between. And that's why I describe these as deliverable items and not particularly individual photos in my contract. The final thing I want to talk about is I do try my best to get a deliverable aerial style photo with a painter's pole, about a 20-foot painter's pole and a DJI Pocket 2. And I can get that up there pretty high and get something that looks like it. But if I've got a client that's a real pain in the ass, then I don't even worry about that and I just substitute it out. Let's talk about what that feature card is. So we're already saying that the pricing is low for the area, but it's not really low if you don't have a lot of interaction with the client. If they interview you, decide they want to work with you, and then start sending you work, it shouldn't be 1,000 questions. There shouldn't be someone standing there telling you where to take photos. In fact, when clients start taking my time, I just let them speak, take all the time they want, and then I bill them the additional $100 for taking my extra time at that location. You see, I'm very spot on. I'm at 45 minutes max on location. Anything after that, I'm billing you $100 per hour, right? In addition to what you've already paid. It's that simple, because you have people that will steal your time. Now, I do have realtors that have become friends over my several years of doing this. And when they come together, we're really shooting crap. We're having a good time. I've actually taught several of my friend realtors that still hire me how to take real estate photos with their iPhone or with anything else. And I don't charge them any extra because we've developed a different relationship and, they're respectful of my time. All of these things that I'm talking about have to do with people that are not time respectful, that are really time wasters. And you'll know what I'm talking about later. So we get this rack card. This is one way that we stand out, or I stand out. The rack card is a 16:9 or is a 5:4 digital item that can be printed or used socially that has the hero shots of the property that we're at. The aerial shot's important because it shows the location, and then 3 hero shots. I do it in a 4-up with a map in the center and some contact information. That's something clients love. They absolutely love this. They want it because it helps them market. So it takes this $179 package, which is the one everyone's going to get. 15 photos, aerial, blue sky guarantee, digital conversion, rack card, and 24-hour delivery, and turns that around into a quick 1 hour, maybe 2 hours total of work between driving to a location and coming back. You got about 45 minutes. You got 45 minutes on location. That's 90 minutes. And it takes me about 30 to 35 minutes, maybe 40 minutes to process all of that stuff at the end. So you're at 2 hours, 15 minutes. That's really not bad. You're $180. What? That's a little bit less than $90 an hour. It's not where I want to be. I try to have this all packaged at work time around $100 an hour. It doesn't always work out that way. But multiple calls during the week. I'm a wedding photographer, right? So I'm really working weekends for my bread and butter. This makes a lot of sense. But when we get all this stuff put together, that's the pricing, that model that gets people in the door for me. And some of them will think $179 is too expensive. For them, I do offer quick and affordable. Look at this, 25 photos, nothing extra for $150. If all you have to do is call me, I show up and I take 25 photos and I come back and I haven't had anything to do with you, yeah, I'll take $30 less. Leave me alone, pay the money, and I'll show up. I never work for payment after the fact. I never work for payment on delivery. Payment is always due 24 hours before the scheduled time, or we have to reschedule. And the contract is written to benefit both parties. They're going to get something immediately, but the reality is no one can determine what a deliverable image is except for me. So that's that. I have additional pricing that I go by, but if you want to look at that, I'll leave a link you can see. This is all specific to my area. But the point that I've made here, and I hope that you can kind of see, is that I'm really trying to use this to keep people from asking me to do more than what I'm willing to do. So this is actually a tool to separate those that truly want my services, that I can go work for, do a good job for, and those that are going to be time wasters. So with that said, let's go to the next part, equipment. And we're back at it with equipment. Are you ready? Let's talk about this. This should be pretty simple. You're going to need a couple of things to do the job properly. Number one is a camera, right? So you need a camera and you need a wide lens. You need at least 20 millimeters. If you're just getting started, don't let anyone fool you. Full frame, we're talking full frame here, so any equivalent on crop bodies. Crop bodies don't matter. Full frame equivalent of 20 millimeters is the absolute minimum that you can use. And you can do a good job at 20 millimeters. Realistically, you need 14 millimeters, maybe even 12 millimeters on a rectilinear lens. The lens doesn't have to be expensive. This is the Samyang f2.8 millimeter, 14 millimeter f2.8. They have a Rokinon version. This works great, and it's around $300, right? What you're going to want to do is everything's going to be shot later at around f8 anyways, so don't worry about buying a real expensive lens and don't worry about buying an autofocus lens. Just buy a lens that you can stop down, which are all of them, and focus. Focus lock is good, so you don't have to accidentally move your focus, but that works. Next thing I'm using an A7 Mark III. So this works for me, but it doesn't have to work for you. It can work however you wish. So I'm going to light up just a little bit. It can work however you wish, and the A7 III is a great camera. Again, it doesn't matter what camera you're using, not really. It matters that you have the field of view. So you need an equivalent full frame field of view at a minimum of 20. That won't be ideal, but it'll get you started for your first couple of jobs to buy another lens that can really make it happen. You won't get anything better by paying more for lenses except for use in other applications. So I only use this lens for real estate stuff. I wouldn't use it in weddings just because, well, I guess I could use it in weddings. I don't have anything wrong with it. It's actually a very good lens. The point that I'm making is without autofocus, the way I shoot for weddings, I need to be quick, so it just would change things up. In any event, the next thing you're going to have to do is have your camera. So whatever that full frame is, whatever that camera is you're using, it's all totally fine. Just make sure you've got something that can give you clean images. We're going to be shooting Flambient, which is a two-shot process. I'm specifically talking a rapid two-shot process. One regular, no flash, one with flash. We'll get into that in the processing part later. Right now, I have a cage on this so that I can put it on a very sturdy tripod. Up here, I have a flash trigger that allows me to trigger off-camera strobes. Now, I use off-camera strobes. This is a Godox 8200 Pro, but you don't have to use that. You could just as easily use an on-camera Godox. Right? You put that on camera. The on-camera strobe will not be as strong of a light, which means you'll have different processing to do. Don't worry about it. You can process your images before you do the Flambient process to help improve them for the overall results, which is something that I suggest. And as you work on your technique, more will happen. Now, what people don't understand is that Flambient is a process of ambient light photography that exposes for the shadows and flash photography that exposes for your white balance and your highlights, right? Specific to see-through windows for window pulls. So you're exposing for the brights. So you can turn your exposure very low on the camera so that you have a dark image except for your windows, and then use the flash to bring in the extra light to light that back up. That shocks the light. It sets it into one particular color. When you put them together, the flash keeps your white balance. The ambient brings in your warmth and shadows, and next thing you know, you have a natural-looking, beautiful photo. You can go very far on the extremes with this. You can use multiple shots. Everything I've talked about here is a two-shot Flambient process. 2 shots. I don't do 3 or 4 or 5 for window pulls. If clients want to pay for the boutique process, they do. I will, but they don't because they want to get it as cheap as is possible. So unless you're doing $1 million home or something real expensive, you're probably just going to be better off doing the 2-shot Flambient. Anyways, at that point in time, I also use the Godox series can trigger all their other flash. It doesn't really matter how you trigger them. The point is you need the camera to be still and not move as you're adjusting it. The way I do that is I use my phone with Sony, has the IME app or whatever, the Sony app, so I can trigger all my stuff on the Sony from my phone. Sometimes there's a little bit of movement when I turn the flash on and off. You can, because I have to do that physically on the device. You don't have to, but my process, it makes it a little bit easier for me. And I worry about that later in post-production with warp, right? I can actually use transform warp if I have any ghosting that I want to cover up. We're going to talk about that later, but my point is, anytime you touch the camera after you take that first shot, you're in jeopardy of moving the image in just the most minute way. That means that you're going to have some overlap in your photo, which will cause ghosting in the final result. What I'm telling you is, who cares? It's $179. You get to determine what to deliver, and I'll show you how to make it look nice. If they wanted more, for you to care that much more, they would care enough to pay you more. They don't. So, and remember, these prices are lower. So find a workflow that works, and that's it. The next thing I'm going to talk about is Do I often use an umbrella or a softbox? Yes and no. If I really like the realtor and I do a lot of work for them, I might spend the extra time to put this in a box and then take it. It does make a difference by softening shadows. There's no doubt. But the reality is, most of the time, I don't. If I'm honest with you, when I first started this a couple years ago, I was always using these techniques to the best of my ability, taking multiple shots, and I did not like the fact that I just wasn't getting paid, so I dropped my prices, decided to do the 2-shot Flambient, and I don't often use an umbrella. Do you know what I let them know? Like, yeah. And if you would like to have something other than my rapid Flambient process, if you'd like to have my boutique hybrid Flambient process, yeah, then that's another $100 or whatever the pricing is. They'll ask me the difference, and I'll show them a portfolio of images, and they can choose which they want. You want to know what they won't have? It will have very few, if any, shadows, completely reduced. It's more like architectural magazine type of stuff. It takes more shots, and usually I use multiple strobes in different locations per shot in order to still do my ambient and my window pulls from my flash. But anyways, that's a different story. The point that I'm making is it needs to be a process that's streamlined for you. So what do you think? We're going about halfway through. Do you have any questions? Don't forget, if you do, I answer subscriber questions. So if you have a question and I don't answer it, and you're not subscribed, you know why. If I look on my YouTube and I can't see that you're subscribed, I won't answer. So if you've got your subscribers hidden, like you don't show your public subscriber list or whatever, if I can't see it in YouTube, I just don't answer. So that's the case. I may answer some people just because I think you've got a good question or may have a conversation, but these videos take a minute, so that's my plug. Subscribe or super thanks. You can do that super thanks down there. That's okay too. Okay, so we've talked pricing. We've talked equipment. Now let's talk process, right? So let's take that over here. So I've got a set pulled up that I've done recently. I want to kind of go over this with you. And I've got some images already pulled out. This is just a standard property. There's nothing really special about this property. And you can look, we've got standard shots. We've got all kinds of stuff. There's nothing special. Look the blase look of the day. See, here's a digital twilight conversion, some different things that I've done. The idea is I'm just kind of showing you how this stuff looks in general, right? Okay, so there's nothing necessarily special. Notice how even when they were doing it, they didn't even get the grass cleaned up from the trimmings and everything right there. Okay, so we moved to the inside, and you can kind of see we can kind of see how these things come together. I've got some shots I want to bring up now to kind of just get this thing moving forwards. Okay, so the very first thing I do, which I'll show you here, I actually come through and I look at my shots and I separate them. I separate them between 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? So if we get back to this, right, then we'll notice there's an ambient shot. Okay, so there's a flash shot, there's an ambient shot, and that's the final product. Okay, now I'm not saying that this is the best. That's something we got to talk about. No. I'm not telling you this is the best and only way to do it. And I recognize that this might be a little bit bright for you. Let's see if I can help that out a little bit. Yeah, I think that helped out a little bit. What I am saying is that this is my process. Pick the parts that you like and make the rest yours. It's just free help. You didn't even ask for it. You just got it. So take the parts you like and go your own way. Again, here we have ambient, we have flash, and then we have the combined shot. Ambient, or there's another flash shot. Then we got ambient, flash, combined. So the point that I say is that I generally separate them so that I've got all my ambient is color red. All my flash is sorted by color yellow, because I can then group them and do different things to them together. Okay. So we'll pretend that's done here. So if this were the case, I would have my flash shot that I would then begin an edit on. So the very first thing that I would do, which I wonder if this has already been done. Doesn't look like any of it. This was actually shot with the Lumix 20-60 at 20 millimeters. So here's an example of a shot that we're going to do, which was done with a 20 millimeter lens, right? Everyone says you have to have 14. I agree, but you can do it with a 20 millimeter lens. So here we go. So I enable the profile corrections. Look at this. If you don't, and you do this to all the shots together so that they're all the same, remember? So our first shot was flash. We made sure we got the window so that we could see through it. Nothing else matters. We want this to be bright enough here, and nothing else matters. So this is a nice bright shot. We can see it relatively flat, mostly bright, and then we apply profile corrections. We do this as a batch process to all of them. Control A, select all, come to develop, turn on auto sync, and then turn on enable profile corrections. Okay. At that point in time, we go from this to that. Okay, now that's done to all of your images. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually begin editing this. The first thing I'm going to do is tell it to go auto. When it goes auto, it's going to adjust the exposure. At this point in time, I double-click exposure and make it go back to 0. This has given me everything that I want for every photo that's selected. It's a batch process. It's done it to 50 photos at once. Only the flash photos, because if you had the ambient photos in here, you'd get a different result on those photos, and we're just working with the flash photos right now. So now I can look at this and say, what do I want it to do? Okay, well, the first thing I want to say, what does auto look like? Okay, so the flash brought me up to 6600 Kelvin. Yeah, but my flash was actually 52, so I'm going to shoot it, put it back to as shot, right? And I'll work on this in just a minute. But we're there. The next thing I'll do is I'll say, well, I really want to brighten some of these shadow areas. Now, I know this is something that the ambient light is supposed to do. Trust me on this. I turn on my highlight detector, and I turn on my darks detector, highlight and shadow clipping. So I see these red spots, and I do my best at this point to adjust my sliders so that the red is gone. I don't necessarily care about the black, but I want to be aware of what's there. What I'm actually trying to do is get my flash image to be as close to a deliverable image that I would want. In this instance, there's some color that I don't like in the shot. Like, I don't know if you can see, but there's green right here. Well, no problem. Come over to our hue, saturation, luminance, grab the saturation color, and then put, let me click that Z, click and drag. Look at that. Now, what's happened is I accidentally rejected it. Let's go back to here. Unpick. Go back to here. What I've accidentally done is lowered some of the green in the overall image, but I got rid of that blue hue. And next thing I'm going to do is raise my greens color, right? So desaturated it there, give my yellows back, and I'm going to come over here and adjust my greens to something that looks pretty through the window, which is going to be a more orange. Send my oranges back. Now all the oranges are starting to look good. Remember, this is what we started with. This is where we are. So this is our flash, looking pretty good right now. The next thing I'm going to do is come over here to my ambient. Ambient, same kind of thing. But in this case, we're not worried about the red. We've got the flash. We don't care about the red. We're worried about the blacks. We want to make sure that we can see all of the different shadows. That's what the ambient's doing. So I'm going to come over here, click auto. It's made some things a little bit darker. Double click exposure. Get rid of the blues by raising the shadows and the blacks if you need to. And I won't really worry too much about the highlights, but I will adjust some of the highlights if possible. And now this is kind of where we'll be. I like this image. I don't really worry about the color for this image, so I'll just tell it to do auto, and it's found an image that kind of works. Okay, now at this point in time, I have to do something different. I now have my flash exposure, and I have my ambient exposure. Looking at this right now, I'm going to go ahead and add a mask, a linear gradient mask, and I'm just going to pull it up from the bottom to about halfway, so we got a nice transition, and all I'm going to do is just increase the exposure a little bit. I need my foreground to be a little bit brighter. So earlier when I said don't worry about it, if for some reason you're using an on-camera flash and you it's not as powerful as the 8200 Pro or some of these other ones, in Lightroom you can adjust that. The biggest thing that you're worried about is the window pulls, to be able to see through it. Now, it's true. The more powerful of the flash you have, the less post-production work you're going to have to do, the easier job will be. But if you only have an on-camera flash and you're just getting started, don't let that be a deterrent. You see what I just did. Well, let's look a little bit closer. On and off. Okay, so now we have a very uniform look. The final thing that we do is come over here. I select these two images. I right-click, and I tell it to open as layers. Open as layers. This is almost as fun as looking at it. Edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. It's going to take it a second to open as layers in Photoshop, but we're coming along. while this is opening up, how are you doing? You having a good time? You learning something? If so, leave a comment. Say thanks down below. I really appreciate all the support that you give me. If you have a question, ask it down below. If you want to send me a super thanks or something, go for it. Okay, now we're here, okay? We've got our images loaded, right, as layers, and they're both in Photoshop under one project. What we're going to do is select them both. I hit Shift and click. I click on one, hit Shift, hold Shift, click on the other one. Now they're both selected. At this point in time, I come over here and I click Edit, and I go to Automatic Align Layers. Now it's done that. The eagle-eyed viewers of you may have noticed that down here, there's an align. You can see there's some dead pixels, some transparent pixels. That's because in order to align, it had to shift just a little bit. That's okay. We recognize that aligning this process with auto align, there may be some ghosting. Now, there is no ghosting in this image, but let's say that there was. I'll show that to you in a second, and I'll show you how to adjust it right now after we do the next point. We want to take our flash image and make sure that it's on the bottom. So we move it to the bottom, or we move the ambient to the top, okay? Once that's done, the next thing we do is we click on the ambient shot. Remember, the ambient shot is the one that we're using for the luminosity. We're using for the brightness and the shadows, and we need to change its blend mode to luminosity. Now, look at that. You see this happening right now, from normal to luminosity. The color goes away, all of this orange or all of this warmth goes away, and we get a very neutral color. That neutral color is coming from the flash shot. Do you see? Okay, so let's do it. Click luminosity, and now we need to blend this luminosity mask because we want a little bit of it. Rapid Flambient, I come right over here to about 50-50. Boom. Now, when we're adjusting the fill of the top layer, which is the luminosity fill, we're actually adjusting how much blend we want for the luminosity. Do not worry about the windows right now. Specifically look at your lights and at the glowing areas. And we want to have some glow, and we want to have our shadows look more neutral. If you can't decide, choose 50%. This is a different on each photo for me, generally speaking. Okay, now that we've done that, everything's the way we want it, and you can see our before and after. The next thing that we need to do, don't worry, we're going to get to warp. We're going to get to warp in a second. The next thing we need to do is clear up our window pools. Okay, we do that by clicking on our top mask, or our top layer, which is, remember, that's the ambient light layer. And when we do, we click the little mask icon down here at the bottom. That pops up a small mask that we can see that's linked to the ambient layer. We click it to make sure that we're on it. And then we zoom in by clicking the mountains, and we go to wherever our lights are. Click the L button to bring up the polygon lasso tool, and then just draw a rectangle anywhere there's a window. Notice in this example, I'm crossing the muntin, or the dividers between the windows. We have several to do here. You can do this process individually for each. I won't. I will do it all together. So we're going to take it the easy way first. Since I've got a selection, I need to push the Shift button so that the little plus sign comes up to my polygon lasso tool. And in this instance, I'm going to make this selection, and I'm just framing the windows. Notice I went over all of this area, so it's more than just the window is included. My point is, remember, this is a rapid Flambient. So I'm not worried about all of these little details that would literally take hours, which I would do on my boutique Flambient process. For here, we've got another one. I'm going to hold Shift again, and I'm going to grab this little spot right here. I've got another one. I'm going to hold Shift again. And I've got a final one here. I'm going to hold Shift again. And I'm just marking these outlines. There's something else that's helping us here. This is also far in the background and slightly blurred, but not really. It's slightly blurred because it's outside the window. Does that make sense? Now, if we zoom back out, we'll see I've got every area that I want selected. And I was on this white mask right here. Nothing's going to happen until I now right-click, select Feather, 1 pixel. That moved the mask. You couldn't tell it on the screen, but it moved the mask out. It gave it a little transition zone so there wasn't just a hard line, a 1 pixel transition. At this point, I'm going to click the keyboard command G and make sure that I have black selected as my primary color. And I'm going to I'm going to fill, G is the fill, with the paint bucket, right? And I'm going to fill in any one of these areas. It'll fill all of them. Did you see that? Then I click up here, deselect. Okay, so let's go to the history tool. There was my feather. There was my paint bucket. That's what I did. Notice, like I said, it didn't matter that these window construction elements were included. And what does that mean? Well, we're excluding this black portion of our mask from this top area that we can see. Notice how they look exactly the same as the Flambient or the flash shot. What we have done is cut these areas out of our ambient shot, which means they're not included in the luminosity mask, right? That means that we can see through them, which was why we were using the ambient light for the shadows and the flash for the highlights. This is highlights for the window pulls. Okay, now that we've done that, I promised you I would share with you how to go and adjust something. Okay, let's say we've got some ghosting. Okay, all we need to do is come up here, edit, transform, warp. Make sure you're on the layer you want to warp. It will always be the top layer, your ambient layer. I'm going to zoom in real close. Now, you may not be able to see this, but I can now, let's pretend this was not aligned. Did you see how it's not moving around? See, we've already created a 60% fill. We can overlay this because it's already overlaid. That's why we waited to this process to address any warp or ghosting. And now all we need to do is just align them up. If you're used to photography with a split image rangefinder, this is very easy. Now, there's not a lot in this image to complete or fix because it was taken properly in the first place. But if you had some warpage, you will be able to use these lines to warp specific areas. Notice how this is kind of pulling this whole part over that way, and it's curving it. It remembers the anchor points of what you were working with. So if you needed to warp, you could very easily get the center of your area warped properly. I'm going to cancel this warp because I don't need it, and then come back to my paint bucket and go back to visibility, and there we go. Okay, now we've got the image right here. Everything's looking good, except for it's time to warm the image up. Now, this is where a choice I made earlier, talking about the flash color balance. You recall I was talking about the color balance a little bit earlier in Lightroom. I had an opportunity to change the color balance then, but I chose to set it specific to the flash temperature I was using, 5600. So I think I set it at 5900 as shot. Well, I think that we could do with a little bit of warmth. So now click on your other image, which is this one, the bottom image. Come over here to filter. This is your flash image. Choose a camera raw filter. At this point in time, increase the temperature. We've made the bottom image warmer. I also want to think I've got some opportunity to adjust my contrast, my shadows, stuff like that. I can bring my shadows down in order to add a little contrast and pull the highlights down a little bit because I've seen kind of what the final image is going to look like. I'm kind of tweaking it. But now at this point in time, I can click OK. Look at what we did. If we're back to here, we have increased now that beautiful warmth. Boom, there it is. Now, I waited to this step because I was unsure of what I wanted it to look like with just one image that I was working with with you guys. However, when I'm doing this with multiple images, I do all of these types of corrections in Lightroom very quickly before I bring them into Photoshop because I want to have as few steps as possible. It's only if I determine there's an issue that I might make a change like this. Let me go ahead and give you that look a little bit closer. Hopefully you can see this. So this was before the temperature adjustment, and this is after. I hope that you can see that. Okay, now we're actually done. I don't really have anything else that I'd like to do to this image, so I'm going to right-click. There's nothing else to do quite yet. I'm going to right-click on any one of the layers, and I'm just going to click Flatten Image. At this point in time, since we're in Photoshop, we have the ability to clean up things that we don't like. For example, if I wanted to get rid of this shadow, I could click my J tool, and then I can come right over here, and Photoshop is very good at determining the types of things to get rid of, right? Notice how I got rid of that. So I'm sure that didn't do a good job there. We just do it a couple times. This is all AI stuff anyways. One last time, see if it gets it. Nah, that would require some clone stamping. But the point that I'm making here is if you needed to adjust something, like let's say this wall outlet was broken and it was nasty, you could get rid of it. But let's say you wanted to get rid of, let's say there was a picture where this boat is. Yeah, perfect. You don't want to have pictures of the previous residents' faces, right, in your shots. So if you had a picture where this boat is, this would be the time to get rid of it. Realistically, you should have already gotten rid of those things when you did your first walkthrough, but since you didn't, we'll just get rid of it now. Photoshop has become a godsend for this. Boom, it's done. Look at that. Looks like I can still see some shadow from it, so I'll give it another hit right here and see what we can get. Now, let's say you needed to tweak something or warp something. You could also come over here at this time, hit L again. 1, 2, 3, Control Z. And then, sorry about that. Let me get this as a click. You could then just click Remove. And it'll think about it using Content Aware, and it'll just simply remove it. This is a great way to get rid of shadows or a great way to get rid of reflections and mirrors. I don't know why it's taking it so long. Now, it's added something. It will often add something. You just click through it to the one where it didn't. In this instance, I don't really like that, so I'm going to remove it. And you can create those additional layers. It will create a layer on top of it, and you can merge those layers. So if you need to do 2 or 3 removes or changes, you can. Heck, if you wanted to put someone on a couch right here, you would just type it, having fun on the couch. And so it's going to think about a person having fun on a couch, and we'll see just how well it does. So the point about this is that this is where you could spend a lot of time in that boutique process. It is not worth it to spend a lot of time. That is a crazy face. AI is weird, but we got something. In any event, that was nuts. Okay. So the final point to make was only that after you flattened your image, you were then able to go ahead and do additional adjustments with the brush. Notice I'm leaving these shadows in. This is a rapid Flambient, two shots. I'm not taking out the shadows. Okay. At this point in time, all we have to do is click Close, select Yes, and it will automatically come back into Lightroom. And down here, it has given that extra shot. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all 3 shots. All 3 are highlighted. I then select the middle shot. I right-click on it, and I tell it to group into stack. So now this is the shot. At this point in time, you would have done this for a series of shots, and you'd have 20 or 30 at one time. At that point, we need to do our final editing. Everything's back over here. What's final editing? Well, I look up here and I see where my highlights are. And I like to be around 80%. So everything's looking good, but it's still very flat. So what does that mean? Well, we hit auto, number one, and see what it does. We double click exposure to put the exposure back where we want. And now we look at our highlights. It added a bunch of highlights. I'm not interested in that. Bring the whites down. We add the shadows back up. And we bring our black down. At that point, we need some contrast. Great. We've got some color issues that we're dealing with now. We can use the eyedropper tool to fix them. A little bit too much. We need to warm it up some. So now we're good. We would be doing this to a batch of photos at one time. Remember, we took all the steps to really make each photo look very consistent from one to the other. So these final tweaks don't take but a few moments. And it's very similar to what you might use match tonal exposures in the menu, except we've done it manually. By taking care to work this process through each photo, we've done a very good job at making sure we've got a nice image. From here, we've added some contrast. The next thing I'm going to talk about is texture and clarity. I always bring texture up to 33, clarity down to minus 18 or minus 20, somewhere in this range. I'm looking at the overall image. That will adjust your highlights, so come back and work the highlights a little bit. Good. Notice how we still have the shadows and some of the flash. We can see that. That's because we're doing this rapid flambient, but we can see the glow from all the lights. The next thing that we're going to do, and we can definitely see outside, the next thing we're going to do is finalize our work in our hue, saturation, and luminance panel. So I want to take my saturation for the greens. I want to pull them down a little bit. I want to take my luminance for the greens, and I want to darken them. Look at what's happening now. I want to take my saturation for my yellows, boost it a little bit, my luminance for the yellows, boost that a little bit. You can kind of see some in there. Now I want to take my hue for my yellows, and I'm going to change them slightly to the orange side. Boom. My greens are going to come slightly to the yellow side. There we go. Now I've just done the color correction for everything. So now if we look before and after, look at what we've got. This is a gigantic change in color. This is looking very natural and very pretty. The final thing that I'm seeing here is a blue hue. Now we got to be careful because we got a lot of blues in this. And in this blue, we can see what hues are there by tapping it. The hue from hue, saturation, luminance, get that little handle, and we can see it's not blue that I was seeing, although it appeared blue. It's actually orange and green, or orange and yellow. So at this point, I take my orange and yellow slider and I move it to the warmer side rather than the cooler side. Orange and yellow move to the red side. To get warmer, they move to the green side to get cooler, which is why I was seeing blue. That's gotten rid of all of that, and I think it's looking great. We can reduce the saturation in the reds and the orange just a little bit so that these don't look too punchy. Realtors are very aware of that, and bring the saturation down in the yellow just a little bit, and now we're good to go. Okay, a final look at this image. It tells me I think we're good. We're going to go ahead and hit sharpening, masking. I do sharpening around 70, 60, masking around 19, 20. I do luminance reduction around 20 on a Sony camera, or on this generation of Sony camera. And there's one thing that we didn't talk about quite yet. I'll do it now, but I usually do it first. When we come back over here into this spot, we have created a new photo. It's either a TIFF or a PSD, depending on how Photoshop exported it based on your preferences. So this is a new photo. So it doesn't have any profile corrections. We don't need to work that right now. What we do need to do at this point in time is where we would do our perspective correction. Click auto and make sure that everything's looking good. The reason we would do that now and not at an earlier step is because if you were at an earlier step in the process, your photos may become unaligned before they get stacked and the Flambient process happens. So we wait to do our keystone and perspective adjustments until after that. Okay, here I click auto, and I'm going to click the R button for crop, and I'm just going to bring up the lines to see everything the way that I like. The nice part is Panasonic lenses usually require very little, if any. So we're set dead on. Click R again, done. We could also click constrain crop. Sometimes when I use the Samyang or the Rokinon 14 f2.8, sometimes that lens is so wide it's kind of barrel distorted that there's a little bit of stuff that doesn't overlap, especially if the images weren't right in the first place. So you get what I'm saying. At this point in time, all we would need to do is name the photo and deliver it. We've got a great image looking right here. You could add more contrast if you wanted to. It might be a good idea to let your eyeballs rest. Send an email letting them know you're about to send it over. By the time you're done with the email, the next thing you know, you're ready to post. So that's the entire process. Takes me roughly a minute to 90 seconds per photo is the amount of time that I allot to doing this. I probably took 30 minutes telling you how to do it, but I take about a minute to 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes if there's something really. I time myself, so if I've got 30 photos and it takes me an hour, that's too long. It should take me 45 minutes. See what I'm saying? So there we go. Okay, now we're going to talk about the final thing, which is strategy, and ask any questions that you might have so we can wrap up. So let's do that now. Okay, and we are back. So finalized, we're talking strategy. We talked pricing earlier. We're talking strategy now. You've seen the process, and you've seen how we put all this stuff together. You recognize it's a very tedious process. There's a lot going on with this, which is why it's so important that people work in an efficient manner with how you are set up to work. If you're trying to go out of your way to do a specific customized thing for each client, you will end up pulling out your hair. Now, there's a market to be had for that, but here's the strategy that I suggest for you. Number one, leave realtors alone. If you can find a realtor group, that's fine. But definitely do work for realtors if you can, but instead look for property management associations, places that have properties that they need to sell for some reason, whether that be short-term stay like Airbnb, Trulia, stuff like that, or whether they need different shots taken for marketing purposes, for feature locations and tours that they're trying to pull people to them. If you get into something too mainstream, you like Great Wolf Lodge or stuff like that, or Days Inn that surrounds Williamsburg, or Hyatt, they're going to have their own marketing teams. You can get in with those people. I've had a very hard time, but I do work with the Delta Hotels by Marriott and do a lot of their photos, corporate and some residential, not residential, residence inn stuff. But those have a lot of different requirements, and that was a lot harder to get, and I don't know if they're really worth it on the volume that I do. The second thing is on the idea of volume. So once you find a property management association, instead of doing packages, all those packages I showed you earlier, I'm getting ready to change. I'm getting ready to change because I've had terrible experiences with a property management association that constantly changes their mind. They requested my services based on a body of work that they promised that they had that they don't have. They wanted special pricing based on that volume. This is normal. They got special pricing based on that volume, which was lower than my standard pricing by about 25%, and then wanted to nickel and dime that. They wanted to use this here and that there. What do I mean by that? I guess that doesn't make sense if you don't know. What I mean is those packages I showed you earlier are for one unit, right? So if you've got a property with 15 different condos, you don't buy the 30 picture package because you want 4 of those condos photographed. No, it's one package per condo. You see what I'm saying? That's the only way with the package model that you'll protect yourself, is that's per unit, not per address, right? And this is a back and forth. So for the past few jobs, I had gotten so tired of dealing with the back and forth. I got tired of saying no. I just said yes while I was deciding how I was going to do the rest of my stuff. Since they refused to sign a contract for that work based on volume, I have no responsibility to give them any amount of work or price for any period of time. I am now arbitrarily changing that to a different model. And after thinking about it, I think it makes a lot of sense for you guys. I'll share that with you now. I think that you should switch to the deliverable model, which is something that was already in my lingo. Look at your services and say, hey, listen, everybody's going to want something a little bit different, but how much do I need to earn per hour if I'm doing this for myself? Let's say you're not supporting a business. Now, for me, for my wedding photography, I'm around $350 an hour. For real estate photography, I'm more at $100 an hour. I don't like being at $100 an hour. I want to be at $150 an hour. So for me, $150 per hour is going to be 15 photos. right? So when you buy the $150 package, you're going to get 15 pictures. That's deliverables, just like we talked about here. That doesn't include a rack card. It doesn't include a blue sky guarantee. Of course, I didn't have to change the blue sky, but in these, I would automatically include the blue sky. Well, let me rephrase. I will continue to include the blue sky. You got to have a blue sky. But it doesn't include the rack card. It doesn't include the digital twilight. And it doesn't include the anything else. So if they want one of those as an item, if they want a rack card as an item, that's something I have to create. That rack card takes me about the same time as a photo. So that's one deliverable item. If they want a digital twilight, that takes me a little bit longer. That's 2 regular photos, maybe 3. Actually, it's probably more than that. But there's a point that I'm making here is you'll have to decide that for yourself. I would charge a price that allows them to purchase based on the hour. So they're going to buy 15 photos, you're going to buy 25 photos, you're going to buy 35 photos, and that's it. So you're buying 15, 25, or 35 items, and that's simple. Also, charge a service fee if you end up having to go back. It's that simple. This client that I have constantly wants me to go, oh, we couldn't do it. Can you come back later and do it? What did I talk about earlier? Charge a service call fee. Sure, you've already paid for the 15 photo package, but since you weren't prepared, since you wanted me here on this day, and since you needed to have those interior shots now, and you just want me to come back and get the rest of the exteriors, you have 2 choices. That's it. You get what you got, or I'll come back for $100. It's that simple. So in that instance, the client has the choice. Well, we're only going to do interior photos, so just do the interior photos. Oh, well, I want 7 outside and 7 inside. Well, since you're not coming back for those, just do all of them inside. We'll do outside later. Maybe we'll do the property outside. Do those things. Protect yourself so that you're not spinning your wheels. This is coming from me that has a regular wedding business. So if you're trying to do this yourself, coming from the perspective of just getting started, some of these tools will be very helpful for you. As you grow your business, if you're not doing weddings, like I was saying, my regular paycheck, my bread and butter money is my weddings, right? So I can be choosy with my real estate photography. You may not be able to be so choosy. And these tactics may be, or this strategy may be too difficult for you. So don't be afraid to just use the best parts that you like for what I've shared with you today. I don't think that any of this is correct. And there's no way in hell that I would hire a photographer and come in and not have shadows in my shots. But that's what these clients want. If they don't want the shadows and they want me to use a big, 3-foot umbrella and stuff like that and do things, they're not willing to pay the price for it. Don't sacrifice your service just to make someone happy. Get what you're paid for is what I'm saying. Your time is worth money. So if they want that, they don't want the rapid Flambient 2-shot process, then they need to pay for the boutique process. There is a difference in labor. And the only reason people would argue with that is because they don't understand it, right? So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think down below. Hope you found this helpful, guys. I'm Rob with Robert Hand Photography. Today we've been talking real estate photos. I'll catch you all on the flip side. Bye for now.